I found out my sister had sold my life on a Tuesday. It was the kind of Tuesday that should have been forgettable. Gray sky. Weak coffee. A pile of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. My 6-year-old son Noah was still in his dinosaur pajamas, building a crooked tower out of cereal boxes while I tried to figure out how to pay a gas bill that was already 2 weeks late. There was nothing dramatic about the morning. No thunder. No warning. No music swelling in the background like in those cheap suspense movies. Just one envelope. It was white, stamped in red, and addressed to me in a neat printed font that instantly made my stomach tighten. People never send good news in envelopes like that. Good news comes in texts, in phone calls, in laughter. This kind of envelope only brings trouble. I opened it with a butter knife because I couldn't find the scissors. Final notice of vacate. I read the first line 3 times before the words arranged themselves into something I could understand. The property had been sold. The new owner intended to take possession in 14 days. Any claims, disputes, or questions were to be directed to a legal office downtown. Sold. I laughed at first. Not because it was funny, but because some part of my brain refused to accept it. Sold to whom? By whom? The house belonged to my mother. Or it had. She died 6 months earlier after a short, vicious illness that hollowed her out so quickly, I still couldn't believe how fast a person could disappear. 1 month she was arguing with me over whether Noah should be allowed to eat marshmallows after dinner. The next, she was sleeping under a blanket in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and fading flowers. After the funeral, my older sister Vanessa handled everything. That was how it had always been. Vanessa handled things. She had the voice for it, calm, smooth, controlled. She could walk into a room full of panic and make people believe she had the map out. She'd done the paperwork at the hospital, spoken to the lawyer, organized the service, collected sympathy casseroles from neighbors, even chosen the photo for the memorial card. I was the one who cried at inappropriate moments and forgot where I put forms and once put a can of soup in the fridge and the milk in the pantry. So when Vanessa said, "Don't worry, Claire, I'll take care of the estate," I believed her. I believed a lot of things Vanessa said. That was probably my first mistake. My second was calling her before I had time to think. She picked up on the third ring, voice bright and polished, like she'd been expecting a call that mattered. "Claire? Everything okay?" I stared at the notice in my hand. I got a letter. A pause. Not long. Just long enough. What kind of letter? A notice to vacate. Silence. Then, oh, that one syllable changed everything. Not shock. Not confusion. Not "what are you talking about?" Just oh. I felt something cold slide through my chest. "Vanessa," I said very softly, because Noah was 10 feet away and children can hear danger even when you whisper it. "Why did I get a notice saying Mom's house has been sold?" She exhaled, slow and annoyed, as if I were forcing her into an unpleasant but necessary conversation. "Claire, I was going to tell you." "When?" "I've been busy." "When?" "Don't do this dramatic tone with me." My hand tightened around the paper until it crackled. "You sold the house?" It was the practical decision. The practical decision? My voice came out sharper than I wanted. Noah looked up, sensing the edge in it, and I forced a smile that probably looked sick. "You sold the house we live in. The house your nephew lives in. Without telling me." "You don't own the house," she said. "Mom did. She's dead. And the estate had to be settled." I couldn't breathe for a second. Mom said the house was for both of us. She said a lot of things. That sentence landed like a slap. I walked into the hallway so Noah wouldn't hear the next part. My knees felt weak. What did the will say? Vanessa was quiet again. "Vanessa, there were debts." That isn't what I asked. The medical bills were enormous. Taxes, legal fees, maintenance. It made sense to sell. What did the will say? And then she said the sentence that would split my life into a before and an after. It left me power of decision. That wasn't an answer. That was smoke. I pressed my hand to the wall. Did Mom leave me half the house? "Claire, you were never good with responsibility." I closed my eyes. There are moments when a person realizes that the argument happening on the surface is only a costume. Beneath it, something older and uglier has finally stood up. This wasn't about paperwork. This was about history. Vanessa had spent our whole lives deciding what I deserved. She decided which bedroom she got when we were kids. She decided what colleges were realistic for me. She decided my marriage was doomed before I did. She decided after my divorce that moving back in with our mother was temporary, always with that polite smile that made humiliation sound like kindness. And now she had decided I could be removed from the last stable place in my son's life with a stamp and a signature. When were you planning to tell me? I asked. Once it was finalized. It is finalized. Yes. So you were planning to tell me after I was already legally disposable. Oh, for God's sake, Claire. Don't act like a victim. You've lived there for months without paying real rent. My son was helping Mom when she was sick. I was helping Mom when she was sick. And I was paying for things you didn't even know needed paying. Her voice sharpened. Do you have any idea how much I handled while you played house in that place? Played house. That almost made me laugh. I was the one cleaning vomit from hospital blankets. I was the one sleeping in a chair next to our mother's bed. I was the one measuring morphine at 3 in the morning, while Vanessa posted tasteful black and white quotes about family strength on social media, and showed up only when there were forms to sign or people to impress. But that was Vanessa's gift. She didn't need to do the work. She only needed to stand near it and claim the glow. You can't do this, I said, though I already knew she had. I already did. I heard movement in the background, heels on hardwood. Her expensive condo, probably. The one with the glass walls and the view of the river and the kitchen no one ever really cooked in. You'll get some money, she said. I stopped. What? I was going to transfer a portion once the remaining fees were processed. A portion? Yes. How generous. Oh, stop. You always do this, you make everything emotional and impossible. The hallway seemed to tilt. How much did you sell it for? I don't think that's relevant right now. How much? She sighed. 480,000. I nearly dropped the phone. Mom's house, our house, sat on a corner lot in a neighborhood that had been changing fast. Trendy cafes. Renovated bungalows. Investors circling like birds over water. Even I knew it had to be worth more than that. How much are you giving me? Another pause. Then, 20. For a second I honestly thought I'd misheard her. 20 what? Thousand. The silence after that was enormous. 40 years of shared blood. $20,000. My mother's garden. Noah's height marks on the laundry room wall. My father's old workbench still dusty in the garage. The porch swing Mom used when her joints hurt too badly to walk around the block. 20,000. You stole from me, I said. Her voice turned icy. Be very careful. No. You be careful. Because whatever you did, whatever you signed, I'm going to see it. You won't understand it. I'll learn. I hung up before she could say anything else. For a full minute I just stood there in the narrow hallway, the phone in my hand, the notice in the other, listening to my son make little roaring noises in the kitchen. Then I walked back in and poured him more cereal. That is the cruel thing about catastrophe. Children still need breakfast. I called the legal office on the notice at 10:12 a.m. By 10:26 I knew two things. First, the house had indeed been sold. The sale had closed 10 days earlier. Second, according to the woman on the phone, whose voice was maddeningly gentle, like she was speaking to someone recovering from surgery, the property had been transferred by authority of an estate executor acting under a will. Can I get a copy? I asked. That would depend on whether you're a named beneficiary or interested party. I'm the daughter of the deceased. A pause, keyboard clicking. I can confirm that you are listed. Relief hit so fast it hurt. Then yes, I said. I want everything. By noon I had arranged to pick up the probate file in person the next morning. By 1 o'clock, I had called in sick to the diner where I waitressed 3 lunch shifts a week. By 2 I had texted Noah's father to see if he could take Noah for a night. By 2:05, he replied with a thumbs up emoji and the words can't. In Denver. That was Trevor in 3 words. Geographically unavailable and emotionally minimalist. So Noah stayed with me, and while he drew dinosaurs at the coffee table, I began opening every drawer in my mother's desk. I don't know what I was looking for. Proof maybe. Or maybe the physical act of searching felt better than sitting still with betrayal. The desk was old cherry wood, scarred at the edges, the same one Mom used for Christmas cards and bills, and once when I was 12 to hide my report card because she said I needed one night of peace before Dad saw the math grade. Inside were recipe cards, rubber bands, a half-finished crossword, takeout menus, church donation slips, batteries that probably no longer worked, and 2 years' worth of receipts folded so neatly they looked ironed. At the back of the bottom drawer, under a stack of outdated insurance papers, I found a small tin box. Inside it was my mother's wedding ring, a dead watch, and a key. Not a house key. Too small. A safety deposit box, maybe. My pulse jumped. There was also a scrap of paper with one word written on it in my mother's handwriting. Maple. That was the name of her bank. I sat back on the floor, the key in my palm, and felt something I hadn't felt all day. Not comfort. Not hope exactly. But movement. My mother had known Vanessa. Maybe not completely. Narcissists hide in plain sight best when they're related to you, but enough. Enough to know that important things needed backups. That night, after Noah fell asleep with his arm hanging off the bed, I sat at the kitchen table and did something I should have done years ago. I made a list. Facts. Questions. Names. Dates. Mom died on January 14th. Vanessa said she was handling the estate. I never saw the will. The house was sold for $480,000. I was apparently getting $20,000. Why? What debts? What fees? Who bought the house? Who appraised it? Who witnessed the sale? What did the will actually say? I stared at the list until the words blurred. Then, beneath everything else, I wrote one more line. When Mom was sick, she stopped trusting Vanessa. I knew that because she'd said it once, half asleep on pain medication. Your sister always counts before she gives, she murmured. At the time I didn't understand. Now I did. The probate office was on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like dust and copier ink. I expected drama, resistance, bureaucratic hostility. Instead, the clerk behind the glass was almost cheerful, sliding papers toward me as if she were handing over baking instructions. I read the will standing there. The room didn't disappear. There was no cinematic rush in my ears. Just one sharp, clean sensation. Fury becoming focus. The will did not leave Vanessa power of decision. It named Vanessa as executor, yes. But the estate, including the house, was to be divided equally between both daughters after settlement of legitimate debts. Equally. I read it again. Then again. There was also an addendum dated 3 months before Mom died. Signed, witnessed, notarized. My mother's jewelry and personal effects were to be distributed, according to a handwritten memorandum kept separately. No memorandum was included in the file. The listed estate debts were significant, but nowhere near enough to justify my disappearing share. I requested copies of everything. Every filing, every inventory, every recorded distribution. The clerk stapled it all into a packet almost an inch thick. On the way out, I asked for the buyer's name. She looked uncertain but checked the public filing. Marlowe Residential Holdings, she said. I frowned. A company? Yes. I stepped into the elevator with the packet against my chest and felt the first real taste of what had happened. Vanessa hadn't sold the house to a family, or a retired couple, or a young mother who fell in love with the porch swing. She had sold it to a shell. And shell companies do not buy houses out of sentiment. They buy them for someone. Outside, the spring air felt too bright. I called the number listed for Marlowe Residential Holdings. No answer. I searched the company online on my phone while standing on the sidewalk. Sparse records. Newly registered. Minimal web presence. No staff page. No operating history. A ghost wearing a necktie. Then I searched the registered agent. The last name made my stomach turn. Hale. Same as Vanessa's boyfriend. Elliot Hale. Real estate developer. Expensive shoes. Too white smile. The kind of man who always seemed amused by rooms full of ordinary people. He and Vanessa had been together for 4 years, which in Vanessa time was practically a state treaty. I looked up at the glass building across the street and laughed once, quietly. It wasn't just theft. It was planned. When I confronted Vanessa that evening, I didn't do it over the phone. I drove to her condo with Noah in the back seat and told him we were making a quick stop before dinner. The building had a doorman. Of course it did. Vanessa came down after I texted her from the lobby. She was wearing cream-colored trousers and a silk blouse, and she looked exactly the way women in expensive skincare ads look when they are about to explain why boundaries are important. Then she saw my face. "You came here," she said. I held up the packet. "Marlowe Residential Holdings?" Her expression changed so slightly most people would have missed it. I didn't. "You went to probate," she said. "Yes. You had no right to ambush me at home." "No right." I stepped closer. "Did Elliot buy Mom's house through a shell company?" "Keep your voice down." "That's a yes." The doorman looked away with professional discomfort. Vanessa folded her arms. "It was a business arrangement. With your boyfriend. With an investment group he's connected to. So your boyfriend's company buys our mother's house for less than market value, and somehow I'm supposed to think that's normal?" "It was appraised." "By whom?" "Someone he golfs with." Her jaw tightened. "You sound unhinged." "I sound like someone who just learned her sister sold her home out from under her." "It is not your home. My son lives there. And your son is not my legal responsibility." That did it. There is always a sentence. A final ugly sentence that clears the fog and leaves nothing but the skeleton of a person standing in front of you. For me, that was it. I saw her then, not as my sister, not as family wrapped in cruelty and excuses, but as a woman calculating her advantage and annoyed that sentiment kept interfering. I took a breath. I want the full accounting. Every debt. Every fee. Every communication. And I want the handwritten memorandum. There isn't one. There was. Mom wrote one. Vanessa gave a tiny shrug. Then perhaps she misplaced it. My mother who labeled extension cords. Sure. I stepped so close I could smell her perfume. Listen to me carefully. I know what the will says. I know the house was supposed to be split equally. I know Elliot is tied to the buyer. If you think I'm just going to take $20,000 and disappear, you've made the first mistake of your life. Her eyes went flat. "No," she said softly. "The first mistake of my life was believing you'd ever grow up enough to understand that some people have to make hard choices." I almost answered. Then I saw Noah through the lobby glass, watching us from the car with his small face pressed to the window. So I swallowed the words that wanted to come out and turned around. As I reached the door, Vanessa called after me. "If you fight this," she said, "you'll lose the house anyway. And you'll lose what little money you have left doing it." I looked back. "For once," I said, "I'm not afraid of losing." That was new, and I think she heard it. The lawyer I found the next day worked above a laundromat and had coffee stains on 2 separate folders, which somehow made me trust him more. His name was Daniel Mercer, and he did not smile much. That also helped. He read the probate documents in silence while I sat across from him twisting a paper cup in my hands. Finally he looked up and said, "Your sister's either incredibly reckless or she thinks you won't push. Will I win?" He leaned back. "Litigation isn't a magic machine. But do I think there are enough red flags here to freeze distributions and challenge the sale?" "Yes." A strange laugh escaped me. "That sounds almost optimistic." "It's not optimism. It's paperwork." I liked him immediately. We filed within 48 hours. Challenge to executor conduct. Petition for full accounting. Motion to delay final distribution. Request to review sale circumstances and beneficiary disclosure. When the notice was served, Vanessa called 12 times in one day. I didn't answer. Then Elliot called from an unknown number. That I answered. "Claire," he said, smooth as oil, "I think this is getting unnecessarily adversarial." "Really?" "Because I thought selling my dead mother's house behind my back was the adversarial part." A soft chuckle. "You're emotional." "Understandably. But these things are often more complicated than they look. They look like fraud." "That's a dangerous word." "So is eviction." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You should consider settlement." I stared out my kitchen window at the overgrown garden my mother had loved. "You know what's funny?" I said. "Men like you always think poor women scare easy." "Men like me?" "Yes. The kind who mistake exhaustion for weakness." His voice cooled. "This won't end the way you hope." I smiled without humor. "Then maybe it'll end the way you fear." I hung up shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From the startling realization that once you stop trying to be liked, your voice gets stronger. 3 days later, the bank confirmed my mother had a safety deposit box. Because I was a named beneficiary and because the estate was under dispute, Daniel got a court-approved presence to access it with me. Inside were documents, a few pieces of jewelry, my father's military watch, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Not Claire and Vanessa. Just Claire. My hands trembled so badly Daniel had to pass me his letter opener. Inside was a note. It was short. My mother had never wasted words. If you are reading this, something has gone wrong. That sentence hit like cold water. I wanted to believe I had time to fix everything properly, but sickness makes cowards of plans. Vanessa knows how to sound responsible when she wants control. Do not let her rush you. There is a list of my wishes here and copies of what I changed. Trust your memory over anyone else's confidence. Under the note were photocopies. A revised valuation of the house from a local appraiser dated 2 months before Mom died. Estimated value: $635,000. Not $480,000. There was also a handwritten memorandum distributing personal items, including my father's watch to Noah when he turned 18, the cherry desk to me, and her diamond earrings to Vanessa. Most importantly, there was a copy of a letter from my mother to her attorney requesting that no sale of the house take place without both daughters being notified in writing and given 30 days to respond. I looked up at Daniel. He took the documents and read them twice. "Well," he said quietly, "that changes the weather." I started crying. Not because I was sad exactly. Because my mother had seen it coming. Even dying, she had still tried to leave me a flashlight. Vanessa's lawyer requested mediation before the hearing. Daniel said yes. I think Vanessa thought mediation would be another room she could manage. She was wrong. The conference room was cold and overlit. Vanessa arrived in a navy dress with a folder color-coded by tabs. Elliot wasn't supposed to be there, but he sat behind her anyway like a shadow with cufflinks. Daniel placed our documents on the table one at a time. The revised valuation. The written instruction requiring notice. The memorandum copy. The probate distribution estimates. The buyer's corporate registration linking back to Elliot's associate. I watched Vanessa's face as the evidence arranged itself into something she could no longer charm away. Her lawyer's posture changed first. That was satisfying. He turned to her, eyebrows lifting with a question he didn't say aloud. "Why didn't you tell me all of this?" Vanessa's composure held, but only just. The appraisal was unofficial. Daniel didn't blink. It was signed by a licensed appraiser. The notice letter may not have been final instruction. It's addressed to your mother's attorney and copied in her estate file backup. The shell company is linked to your partner. Elliot cut in too quickly. Linked is a vague word. Daniel looked at him. So is conspiracy, but we're getting more specific. For the first time I saw Elliot lose that amused expression. Just for a second. The mediator suggested private caucuses. In our room Daniel turned to me. "They're going to offer money." "How much?" "More than 20. Less than fairness." I thought of the porch swing. Noah's bedroom. My mother leaning over that very sink shelling peas in summer. What if I don't want money? He studied me. Then be ready to endure. In the other room they kept us waiting an hour. When the offer came, it was almost insulting in its elegance. A cash payment substantially higher than before. Relocation assistance. No admission of wrongdoing. Immediate withdrawal of claims. I laughed. The mediator looked tired. "Ms. Bennett, this would avoid lengthy litigation." "Yes," I said. "That's why they want it." I declined. The mediator sighed. Vanessa glared. Elliot smiled the smile of a man revising his tactics. As we left, Vanessa caught my arm in the hallway. "You're making a terrible mistake," she hissed. "No," I said. "I made a terrible mistake when I trusted you." Her grip tightened. "You think Mom trusted you more? You think being the one who sat by the bed made you the better daughter?" I looked down at her hand until she released me. Then I said the truest thing I had learned in months. "No. I think love and entitlement are different things. You just never learned that." She went white. That's the thing about narcissists. They can survive accusation. They can twist facts, rewrite scenes, perform innocence. But sometimes if you name the wound beneath the behavior, they have no script. The hearing took place 6 weeks later. By then, the story had spread through enough legal corridors that even people not involved in the case had opinions. Probate clerks became oddly kind to me. Vanessa stopped calling. Elliot disappeared from public filings tied to Marlowe Holdings. Daniel said that was not an accident. I wore my only good blazer and the earrings my mother left me in the memorandum copy. Vanessa arrived looking perfect. She always did. Court, I learned, is not dramatic in the way television promises. It's slower, stranger, more humiliating because reality is humiliating in administrative language. Numbers were questioned, timelines compared, fiduciary duties explained, communication failures examined, conflict of interest concerns raised. The judge, a woman with silver hair and the expression of someone nearly impossible to impress, asked Vanessa 3 times why she had failed to notify me directly before proceeding with a sale to an entity tied to her partner. Vanessa's answers became thinner each time. Oversight, urgency, administrative misunderstanding. Then Daniel presented my mother's letter. The room changed. Even Vanessa seemed to feel it. The judge read silently for so long that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Finally, she set the paper down and removed her glasses. "Miss Bennett," she said to Vanessa, "help me understand why the court should view your conduct as consistent with fiduciary duty." Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing useful came out. That was the moment, I think. Not legally, the order would come later, but morally, publicly, spiritually even. That was the moment her version of herself cracked. Because she wasn't speaking to me anymore. Or to a family friend. Or to a room she could socially dominate. She was speaking into a record. And records do not care how polished your voice sounds. The sale was not immediately voided, but the court froze further distributions, ordered a forensic accounting review, and required full disclosure of all communications related to the sale. Vanessa's authority as executor was suspended pending review. Suspended. I nearly collapsed with relief. "Outside the courthouse," Daniel said. "That went well." I stared at him. "That's your version of well? For probate court?" "Extremely." I laughed so hard I cried again. He handed me a handkerchief like it was 1952. The accounting review took another month. Here's what they found. The house had been sold well below probable market value. Certain listed estate expenses had been inflated. 2 repair invoices were tied to companies that existed mostly on paper. Funds had moved through an account Vanessa controlled for temporary estate management. And the proposed distribution to me had no defensible basis at all. There are few pleasures as pure as watching math betray a liar. Vanessa resigned as executor before she could be formally removed. That was strategy, Daniel said. People jump before they're pushed when the ground is already gone. A neutral administrator was appointed. The sale, after pressure and review, was unwound through settlement negotiations no longer favorable to Elliot. I never learned exactly how much that cost him, but I know enough about men like him to understand this. Money hurts them less than exposure does. Marlowe Residential Holdings vanished as quietly as it had appeared. The house was placed back into the estate pending proper distribution. And 6 months after the Tuesday that began it all, I stood in the kitchen with a new set of papers in my hand. Final distribution. Half ownership to Claire Bennett. Half value offset to Vanessa from remaining estate assets and adjusted settlement figures. Right of first residential occupancy granted pending buyout terms. It wasn't a fairy tale. Life never cleans up that neatly. I still had bills. I still worked too many shifts. Trevor was still useless from several states away. The porch still needed repair. The upstairs bathroom sink still dripped. Grief still came in strange ambushes, like finding one of Mom's scarves behind a door, and having to sit down for 10 minutes because the smell of her lotion had somehow survived. But I wasn't erased. That mattered. Noah still lived in his room with the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. That mattered more. Vanessa came to the house once after everything was finalized. I almost didn't open the door, but something in me wanted the ending to have a face. She looked older. Not in years. In damage. There are consequences to being found out, and not all of them arrive through courts. Some come through silence. Some through parties you're no longer invited to. Some through men who discover scandal is inconvenient. Some through mirrors. She stood on the porch where our mother used to sit with tea and arthritic hands folded in her lap. I came for the earrings, she said. For a moment I honestly thought she meant Mom's diamond earrings from the memorandum. Then I realized she was wearing none, and she meant something else entirely. Your own? I asked. She gave me a look. Don't be cruel. I almost said, learned from the best. Instead I said, the diamonds are at the administrator's office. You can arrange it. She nodded. Neither of us moved. Spring wind stirred the wind chimes Mom used to hate because they sounded like anxious ghosts. Finally Vanessa said, you think you won? I leaned against the door frame. No. I think I survived you. Her mouth tightened. That house should have been sold, she said. You can barely afford it. Maybe. You'll drown here. I looked past her at the front yard, where Noah had left a plastic shovel by the flower beds. At the cracked walkway my father had poured by hand. At the rose bushes my mother had pruned every March no matter how sick she felt. Then I'll drown in my own life, I said. Not the one you chose for me. Something flickered in her face then. Anger, yes. But also something lonelier. Vanessa had spent so long treating control like love that I'm not sure she knew the difference anymore. She stepped back. You were always sentimental. And you were always hungry. That landed. She looked at me for a long second, then turned and walked down the porch steps without another word. I watched until her car disappeared at the corner. Then I closed the door. And that was that. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just an ending honest enough to live with. The first night after the final papers were signed, Noah asked if we were moving. We were eating macaroni at the table because I still hadn't grocery shopped properly and because, after all the legal language and adult poison, I wanted something simple. No, I said. He blinked. For real. For real. He grinned so wide I felt my whole body loosen. Can I paint my room green? Maybe one wall. With dinosaurs? We'll negotiate. He held out his pinky across the table and I linked mine with his. That is how some promises should be made. Quietly. Over cheap pasta. In houses people tried to take from you. Later that night, after he was asleep, I walked through every room. The floors creaked in familiar places. The hall closet still stuck in damp weather. The living room lamp still needed a new bulb. Ordinary things. Sacred things. I stood in my mother's bedroom doorway for a long time. It was empty now except for a folded quilt and the dent in the carpet where her dresser had stood. I did it, I whispered. I don't know whether I meant keeping the house or becoming someone she would recognize. Maybe both. On the dresserless wall there was a square of lighter paint, a ghost left behind by furniture. That's what families do, I think. Even when the people are gone, even when the lies are dragged into daylight, even when love curdles into greed and greed dresses itself up as practicality, they leave marks. Some are wounds, some are instructions, and some are warnings so clear you can build a future out of them. Mine began with an eviction notice. But it didn't end there. It ended with a locked box, a dead woman's foresight, and the terrible miscalculation of people who thought exhaustion was the same thing as surrender. They were wrong. That's the thing I wish more women knew. You can be broke. You can be grieving. You can be underestimated so thoroughly that people start speaking over your life, as if you're already gone. And still there comes a day when you stand up in the wreckage and say no. Not this house. Not my child. Not my name. Not the story you wrote for me while I was busy surviving. No. And sometimes that one word is enough to begin.